Hey guys, been getting lots of messages today from people asking if we've heard about the rapes on Okinawa that happened this week. A couple of US sailors and a Japanese girl in her early 20s. Yes, yes, we have heard about it. It's all over the newspapers and it's all over the TV and being talked about fairly extensively, as it always is every time it happens. We actually made a video about this once before. I'll put a link down in the description about the US bases and this problem that's been ongoing for the last 65 years. And it keeps popping up, unfortunately, every year or so. There's another one. The last big one that was reported. I mean, I think something we need to keep in mind here is that rapes are underreported in Japan because of the embarrassment that it causes the victims. They don't want that embarrassment, so a lot of the victims just don't report it. So the only ones that we really hear about are the ones that are reported, of course, and then we hear about them big time. So, the last really big one was a 12-year-old girl that was raped by 3 US service people. So it's really, really bad. It not only reflects badly on all the US service people, but foreigners in general, because unfortunately a lot of Japanese people just think we're all the same. It doesn't really matter what country we come from or who we are, that if we're foreigners, we're foreigners. So every time a story like this goes big, it just makes us all look like animals to some people. I'll also add that on the other video that we made a couple of years ago about this, the last time it was a big issue in the media, some of the most reasonable and well thought out comments on that video were by American service people or ex-service people. And interestingly, in that video we actually were trying to make the point that perhaps it's time for the US service people to leave Japan and for Japan to take over the bases that are now being operated by Americans in Japan. If the Japanese Self-Defense Force maybe should take over those bases and look after their own defense. And a lot of people got all emotional about that and said that it wasn't a good idea, or different reasons. But interestingly, if you have a look at that video and look through the comments, you'll find that most of the people, or a lot of the US service people that actually commented, agreed that the time was to go. One of the comments there was really well put, and he was basically saying that take the US service people back to America and use them to defend the borders, the American borders, and get them out of Japan, because unfortunately it's this negative stuff that's always in the media. Some people were saying to me a while back that when the disaster happened in Tohoku, that the American military sent helicopters and aeroplanes to help and soldiers to help and so on. And that's true, but unfortunately, that was a time of big disaster, and the news was just full of horror stories about all these people dying and families, just lots of horror stories. It was just full on 24 hours a day for months, all the horror stories that came from the disaster. So talking about the American military helping out, particularly, lots of other people helped out, Red Cross and Doctors Without Borders and, other people helped out as well. So I never actually saw in the Japanese media any mention of that at all, just because there was so much other stuff going on that they didn't do a special story. Where we saw that reported was actually on the American media, so CNN and Fox and those people talked about how the US military were helping out, which was a good thing for them to do, of course. But some people are trying to tell us that this is the good stuff the American military do, so that balances it out. It doesn't balance it out, unfortunately. If you just search it for yourself, if you just look on Google and search for rapes, American service personnel rapes in Japan, and it's not just that. There's been murders as well. There's been there was a taxi driver murdered. There's fights all the time in the bars, and a lot of the bars down there in Okinawa ban the American service people because they fight and they grope the women, and I think one of the problems we've got here is there's a cultural difference as well. Western women you know, Aussie girls, if you try and grope an Aussie girl, if she's not into it, she'll tell you to go away in very strong words and assert herself. And unfortunately, in Japanese society, men usually aren't like that, which means that the women aren't used to that sort of behaviour, which means that they're very vulnerable. They're very trusting and they're very vulnerable. And when you get assertive Western males asserting themselves, this is the sort of result that can come of it. So it's just terrible. And I mean, I'll just reiterate again that most of the most reasonable comments that we've had on that other video were for American service personnel that are here now or have been here in the past. And more of them said that they thought the American military should leave than said that they should stay. You can see that for yourself if you have a look at that video. There's some of them that said that they should stay, but if you look through, you'll see the majority said they should leave, and it seems to be the best solution. The solution that they have come up with short term is that there's a curfew being imposed from 11 at night till 5 in the morning, so that service people have to be back in their bases by 11 o'clock at night and have to stay till 5 o'clock in the morning. So it's probably better than nothing, but long term, you know, the Okinawan people are over it. Most of them, they're protesting and they want the bases, you know, gone. And it's not just the raping; it's the the violence and stuff. It's also the noise. You know, there's fighter jets coming and going and all sorts of noise and disturbance and so on. And they just don't. Majority of them just don't want people down there anymore. So. Very difficult topic. So the only reason we really made this video was just because lots of comments are coming. Have you heard about the rape? Have you heard about the rape? Yeah. It's in the newspaper. It's on the TV. It's on the news. It's being discussed on the TV by different panels and things, and it's going to ignite this thing all over again. So it's really unfortunate. I feel terrible for all the victims, of course. But I also feel sorry for the good American service people, because that must be really frustrating for them. And I'd imagine the good guys, the good people, the good men and women in the American services, now they've got a curfew imposed on them because a small percentage of them were behaving badly, and very badly. Criminals, basically, aren't they? Raping and killing and stealing and fighting is criminal behaviour. But the majority of them that are good people now have this curfew imposed on them. So I'm hoping that 99% of them that are good people will give that 1% a good hiding. now that they're responsible for having this curfew imposed, because that's unreasonable. Hard-working men and women that want to go out at night and have a few drinks and have a good time, they're not kids. They shouldn't have to have curfews imposed on them. But obviously that's had to be done because of that small percentage of bad people that can't control their urges and behave themselves like human beings. So very unfortunate situation. So yeah, I'll leave it for you guys to debate whether you think it's a good idea. I mean, it's not going to change. It's not going to change. That last video, there's people saying, "Oh, anywhere you get lots of men, you're going to get rapes." Well, and there's other people that say, "Oh, well, Japanese guys do rapes as well," and that sort of stuff. Well, yeah, that's true, but the thing is, the difference is that the foreigners like us are guests. We are guests here, and it is true that when foreigners commit crimes in Japan, it is made more of a big deal. Recently, there was an armed hold-up in Tokyo by an Australian guy, and they caught him the next day because he went in there and spoke English, and it was too easy to catch him. But it's true that when foreigners commit crime here, it is a bigger deal than when the Japanese commit crime. And some foreigners complain about that and say it's not fair that we only commit a small percentage of the crime. How come such a big fuss is made? I think it's because we're guests. It's like if you start throwing stuff around inside your house, that's not very good. But if I come to your house and start throwing your stuff around, that's worse, right? And I think that's the difference. I think that we're guests here. And I mean, rape and crime and violence by any person on any person is a bad thing. But I think the reason we get more attention for it is we're guests, and it's not the way a good guest behaves to come to someone else's country and commit crime. So, You know, the guys that are committing these crimes need to be punished severely. If the Japanese justice system had them, they'd be punished severely. But unfortunately, with the American military people, they get whisked away back to the States, and you know, whatever punishment they get, it's not going to be anything like what the Japanese would do to them, because the justice system here is really severe. So, you know, long term, the solution's got to be to hand the bases back to the Japanese, let them handle it. You know, just leave all the equipment here and leave. It's going to be cheaper for the US long term. You know, strategically they want to be here. It's not for the Japanese benefit. Some people are trying to say that, you know, it's to protect the Japanese against China and Russia. It's not. The American military don't go anywhere unless it's of benefit to them. So strategically they're here because it's a good strategic place to be based. As the American military people will tell you, if you listen to what they're saying, the American service people know this. So anyway, I'll leave it for you guys to discuss this, what the solution will be and everything else. But so yeah, we've heard about it all day, every day for the last week. Anyway, more videos coming soon.